be down before? Oh my god, yum.
Hey, did you ever want to hold a terry fold? I got one right here. Grab a terry flap, squeeze it. Grab it, squeeze and tug on my terry flap. Hey, I want to take you to the terry fold dance. Want to come with me? You can grab my holy folds. Squeeze them tight. You son of a bitch. Suck my holy flappy folds. Lick my flappy foldy holes. My terry flaps in your mouth. Suck my flaps, you piece of shit. Suck my flaps, you piece of shit. Suck my flaps, you piece of shit.
So concerning what I am submitting now by this time, that what Roger Toll and Gary Kantz consider themselves to be involved in, it's a place, it's the type of job where they are, I guess you could say, free to base more judgments around the ethics provided by their metaphysics, whereas a pharmacist's role would be limiting to that end, in that, you know, it would just take a doctor's authority for some supply, and they might snicker and think, oh, your clothes are dirty, why should, you know, and don't look at us in our pharmacist uniform with the flap along the front. You know, and so they're clocking shenanigans. They honestly think that what it amounts to is a truly genuine science of thought and of the human mind, and of essentially conflicts are what they want established upon detection, but are they even good at that? There's the argument that follows, like following forced consultations with psychiatry officiates, then you may say that by that point there are issues, because the psychiatrist doesn't want to seem to discuss the nuances of the issue at all. They just want to say, can we say that you have, you know, like, can we say you have, I don't know, whatever term they've got for it. Can we just say you have disorder type B and disorder type C, and then you'll be in a yes or no. But to get into a debate or a discussion with them about the nuances involved, as far as I could tell, posed the problem of being able to talk through it, and then the counselling agent would see that it's resolved. Matters are resolvable to your mind, and then they would be, I guess, that then, you know, using these as grounds for the lifelong supply of a particular medication then becomes problematic. So yeah, as far as with what Gary and Roger do, though, it's I've wondered whether it's the nightmare of Einstein and Bohr's debates in the latter part of their lives come true, and that it fell into the wrong hands, because religious people are forever, they're doing what they've done throughout history. They're forever taking over somewhere, going, why? Like, what we're doing is a good thing. And no matter what it is, they can always say it was a good thing. If they're coming here and enslaving white Christians, coming here and enslaving Aborigines, it's a good thing. And it's not the Bible's fault. well, yeah, it's not the Bible's fault. Would have been those people's fault, but the Bible was their holy book. What I think he should be forced to prove to people that audit him is that upon his detection of sounds, it's not enough to say. Otherwise, the sound of watching a newscast or a news story would be enough to set off his alarm and his detection methods. Hearing, or hey, did you hear the story about the guy that lost breath when he got tackled on the football field, fucking nearly died? Or if you say a joke that's funny enough and the people listening to your jokes say, oh, you're killing me, and and he's got some keyword based search algorithm for when he's doing his studies. All he should really need to know, if what he's looking into is a conflict within a person's mind, that's a conflict to the extent that what they are going to go out and do is potentially harm across the fundamental rights of another. So life, health, movement, and expression. Now, so even just saying formative judgment isn't enough. Like, if you've heard something off from a record or a show, and it's inspired you to think more, they don't even seem to be able to know that you're thinking more about it, and as far as they would say that you're thinking more about it on the basis of a count of nerves, what they call nerves, but they wouldn't know that what the proliferating thoughts are thoughts of them. There could be thoughts in contest of them. There could be, which means, yeah, they wouldn't know inspiration from a Freemason getting told, when you get to the top of the tower in Freemasonry, it's really secret, but there's boobs on all the walls. Everywhere you go, there's boobs. They don't even have door handles into the Grand Poobah's official chambers of the most secretive levels of Freemasonry. You just go and you just squeeze a boob and then the door will open if the Grand Poobah lets you in. If you're uncomfortable sitting down, you can sit on a bunch of boobs. If you need a massage, some boobs will just slap against your shoulders. They're not... Yeah, paranamasia. You hear the word paranoid more than you hear about paranamasia. It refers to what Aldous Huxley would call the doors of perception. And so what I think there is scope and limitation to what they should have to answer to in order to keep a person for a certain amount of time in a certain study. And their methods both need to be a lot more refined, because the researchers' paradox is, well, I wouldn't even call it a paradox. The researcher's dilemma is, so they stipulate a thing. Well, you're being researched on the premise that they think that there's this thing to find in your head, which is essentially it could be a formative judgment to go and destroy a small family of 4, for instance, or to steal a vehicle and drive it into a fuel tank at a service station at 120k. Now, with both of those scenarios, if your critical question is, have you found proof then they become the it that these researchers are searching for. So if your question is, have you found any proof of it yet? They'll go, no, but we'll keep looking. They'll go, no, but not yet, but we'll keep looking. And meanwhile, they've subjected a person to a lot of endless strain, a lot of endless pressure, a lot of endless antagonism, found no results, and they're not going to find results. So it's them saying, the absence of evidence isn't necessarily evidence of absence, and that's a Christian PHAR saying. What's more, a lot of the evidence of flaws in what he hears or detects, as he might have you think, in his study domain, can bear out in his personality during having to work for him. I mean, if being accosted and told, well, haven't you had it rough? You were never given the chance to come into fruition with your true sexual nature. Don't worry, my partner Gary and I are Freemasons, and we'll help you become a PHAR. But be a PHAR. Make sure you're a PHAR with decency. Make sure you're a PHAR with decency. And then the same word he'll use, PHAR, for when he's talking about someone he clocks and puts into the psych ward. Now you've made him offers or requests for help on neither front, neither that he helps. And he has no kids of his own, Roger Tall. But he's the one to do this and blur terms in this way. So, what does it say about him if he has to use the same word for someone he's apparently helping, to, at least in his mind, helping to someone who he's, putting it onto the mental health system, and he has the same word for both, and they're very different types of jobs. Yeah, so he's absolutely tremendously over the moon with the advancement of the tech, but he's also this it's like a Victorian era. I see elements of Victorian era, posh and prima properness in Freemasonry males, while they consider themselves, able to detect a homosexual male just from looking at him, and other than that, they remind me of, Christianity seems to be their competitor, their prime choice of a competitor, with the two fronts of Lucifer being the one who always outsmarts Yahweh, the Christian God, and arguably controls him. If Lucifer said to Yahweh, the uniting church doesn't really worship God, then God would, according to the Bible, but most likely detonate explosives in every uniting church building throughout Australia or the ACT, and then as a test to see if its believers regroup. The Book of Job is nothing to be proud of, I would argue, to a believer. The first thing God does is goes and kills all of Job's 10 children, as Job's first test to see if Job really loves and worships God. And so there's a biblical fairy tale ending where later on Job's compensated by God giving him another batch of 10 children, but should he give them the same 10 names as the first batch of 10 that God killed, or should he come up with 10 new names? Because I wouldn't call that a compensationary effort. And yeah, once again, to a God being all-knowing, as he's already well stated that he knows all things by this point in the Bible. When Lucifer challenged him, he would have just scoffed and laughed at Lucifer, because Lucifer is limited in knowledge, and God, in knowing all things, would have known that this subjecting Job to these tests would have only proved, at the unnecessary expense of innocent life, that Job was still loyal to him. But yeah, they remind me, the Freemasons, of a Victorian era cross hybrid of the Amish with Islam, and Paranormasia studies. It's pathetic what they do, because they allude to being psych military, and that you're getting some profound privilege, whereas you're aware that nothing's substantial. If this is just him sort of, shaking his dick around at work, so to speak, it has no bearing on your role in the pharmacy, and he tends to be gone within 10 seconds of whatever he had to say, and you can go back to focusing on the rest of your job, the rest of your day. So, although silence, it takes, all it takes to Roger or Gary is silence, and they think that you're calling them awesome, essentially. But yeah, what they should be doing when they're studying audio signals is that they should have definite means to isolate an audio signal and determine, well, are the words and the arrangements of these words even offensive? Are they a formative judgment on your behalf? Are they or on a person's behalf? Is this a measure of an intent to violate someone's rights in relation to the legal principle? Is it a formative judgment that represents intention to violate another person's right to move? Is it a formative judgment that purports to, or represents intention to violate another person's rights to health, to expression, or to life? And if they can't establish that, the sorts of things that they want to study, it's the idiots, the religious idiot, learning about it again, but in a longer way. Like they've delayed the trip to working out about the idiocy of faith, of theological faith. These Freemasons with their hideouts, they've made the trip 10 times longer to complete, and while assigning themselves tasks and levels of responsibility in relation to society that really they should not have. They should not have, without tremendous qualifications and dealings with neurology council courses, and yeah. Their best way of dealing with you. That's why I ended up saying to them, just don't deal with me, because I've worked out that it's better just to resolve or handle problems with store level management than it is to meet and intervene and sit out the front with either of the two of you, because it's not so much that you're scary as that you're frighteningly stupid. That's because it's like being recruited into a religion, just working for you two. And there'd be profound errancies. There'd been countless profound errancies for which they would expect a person to just sit back and endure symptoms while they, and see, in the event that there's nothing to be found in a given person's situation, at what point do they go, okay, we've therefore made an error, taken up a lot of your time, this is our wrong or our fault. Not a company that's painting everybody needs us and we know what matters all over their storefront, their shop fronts as their slogans, or contacting me after leaving saying things like, we don't make mistakes. That's how a fundamentalist Christian preacher speaks and thinks, or someone who thinks that they are an instrument of a supernatural being between that being and man. Now, Roger's got the indicative suggestions that he might indeed feel this way from a number of fronts. He's got the drive to bear out a difference, or bear out an effect on a demographic. He's got a definition of a gay male that I don't think is fair on gay males. It's only after a small few. The definition, your responsibility comes from the rebellion against your own sexuality. Well, for a gay person, their own sexuality is that they're gay. So you don't, sheep that are gay, homosexuality has been discovered prevalent throughout a whole lot of different species of life, and I don't think they really go through this rebellion on the inside, that they're rebelling. I just don't think they give a shit. They just go off and be gay. And so a gay person rebelling against their own sexuality would be straight. And so Roger's definition of a gay person says, I think, a bit more about him than it does about the entire gay community of the entire country, nay, the world. But yeah, so what he's into. So we've measured some neural pathways. We're looking for occurrences of the word kill, so we can shock them. It's his study method is exacerbative to parts of the brain, and the citizen may not know it, or know that they're technically involved in what would be classed as an abduction if they were more familiar with rights. Now, the company's criticism of such a person and their family at large is that their family is too religious to have wanted to make itself a party to the rights charter of the Commonwealth, or or things, counter disputes of this sort. So what hope is it for them or for their kids if if the parents are just so religious that you could send a gang could come in to start raping them, and they'd all be on bending knees on the floor praying for their God to forgive and shine the light of Jesus Christ to the rapists. Which would arguably be another proof that, in addition to not having read the Rights Charter thoroughly, that particular family wouldn't have even read the Bible properly either, because it's those rapists might have just trying to be looking for ways to find to buy daughters for prospective new wives, because that's in the Bible. But yeah, Freemasonry is its epistemology is the same as that of any of the Abrahamic monotheisms. I can see why it would spark a fascination if they go, well, we're with the devil, and it creates there's this whole, well, it must have been magic that that the devil could outsmart the Almighty God, whereas it's not so much magic as it is contradiction, given what's said of the same God in other literature. So on that basis, these Masons have gone, well, Lucifer's our patron saint, and we'll come up with our own, but form of magic, and it's these studies is one example. But yeah, essentially, if there's something within a person that they're hoping to find, it becomes over time, and you can feel the tension growing from their end, where they're more and more pissed that they haven't got the sort of proof that they thought they were going to find with time and study and effort. You never consented to a study, so you're wondering why they're not fucking pissed off about abduction and various forms of other assortments of other charges and physical injury and perverted old man's sexual deviancy. Like, how arrogant to also think that, a man like Roger Toll can walk around using pufter as the same term as a man whose family wouldn't accept him as gay, so he's taken them under his wing and called them his pufter. But he also uses pufter as the term for all the people that he's rounding up and getting put into psych wards. And then to assume that without asking you if you find his language towards you offensive or not, or while you've been told that your employment won't be officiated on with having signed any documentation, because the onus is on you to prove yourself to the staff body before you'll be given any documentation to sign. So that straight away puts you in a position where anything that could be construed as annoying to any of them, you're deterred from even thinking to say or saying to begin with. But Toad Sports points back to him there's something that he did in Tasmania before moving over the oceans to the mainland of Australia. And then under pressure of being exposed, he goes and does it again, for the stupidity that he starts to reenact on the mainland. Now it's time to embellish bullshit in the States. Now let's go embellish in Bangladesh next. Accountability is a word that Roger Toll doesn't understand very well, if at all. Or he uses the word pufta for that too, because he doesn't have to deal with it. So another space for discussion is art, in addition to this really terrible, worse than B grade process for the establishment of conflicts. Now, the men that are doing this, you've got to think about it. They, on a religious front, have a pyramid scheme that they're quite on par with, like, though more secretive than Tom Cruise and John Travolta in their speeches to the public, where they're trying to say that, you know, Scientology doesn't have anything to do with the belief that the human race were planted here by aliens. Whereas you can tell what that is sort of proof of, that the Church of Scientology wanted some celebrity, probably sponsored the two of them, because they wanted it to show off in promotion of their church to others that they had this sort of celebrity endorsement. Not that there's veracity to the teachings of Scientology, because as soon as both the celebrities that they picked are interviewed about it, you find them going, no, I'm not sure about any of those details. When it's only like the thing that when they run their e-meter tests out in public, that's a test they run concerned with the energy of your thetan, which is your equivalent of a soul, but it's an inner alien left behind, more or less, by the aliens that dumped humanity on Earth. So it's quite a big deal for John Travolta and Tom Cruise to be Scientologists, and then go along saying that they've got no idea about aliens being involved in L. Ron Hubbard's religion. It's a bit like John Travolta saying he had no idea that was Olivia Newton-John. Thought it was he thought it was Julie Newmar in a blonde wig or something. But is art and the propensity to have it art with the interrogative aspects of their study process, and it's what it's disclosing of, and you think about it in terms of its relevance, because some questions are they're dumb fuck questions. You wouldn't ask or frame a question a certain way unless you were really dumb. And the only comparison that works to account for it is what the scope of what religious songs could be in terms of their meaning to either a religion, religious adherent of a denomination of the Christian church, or a different theistic church, or a secretive church, such as with Freemasonry, where I'm told that they chant and scoff or whatever. But well, what are the songs? They're songs that I guess, what do they all have in common? Is it not things like giving credit or paying homage to, or honoring to, honor to a deity? So if that's some universal quality, then it's an absolutely inappropriate basis to go off judging all other genres of music by the same in the same way. Otherwise, you might encounter a heavy metal song about that's about rejection and the vitriol felt when the person is picked on too much or doesn't fit in, and the lyrics to that song might make you think that they're paying homage or honor to well, it's just, yeah, it's absurd. It's patently absurd. So yeah, Roger Tall and Gary Cairns ultimately being just salesmen. They're salesmen that thought they could take the extra mile and venture into this study domain, but ask them questions like, well, when you've are you angry that people have the potential to dream? Do you find that their dreams just get in the way of you possibly finding your results? If you don't find the results that you're after, do you make sure that they can regain their potential to dream back again? How is what you're doing a service at all? How is it not destructive? And given your margency for error, and it's fucking huge, given the licenses and qualifications you don't have, and given that you only really have Freemasonry's agenda as your only excuse to even be involved in this field of study at all. So yeah, it could be like the Fugees killing me softly with his song. And then these two homos would go like, oh, are you all right, love? We're from Capital Chemist. We just thought we'd come and check that you weren't being murdered softly by some bloke's song over there. That's, yeah. And that's the most hilarious thing about them, which, though they have gone beyond a joke, is their definition of a gay person as someone whose responsibility comes from the rebellion against their own sexuality, when their Masonic religion's about the Luciferian Jehovah rebellion. Because with their church not nominal of Lucifer, doesn't matter even if you grant them that Lucifer's winning in their church, it's still rebelling against it, albeit with the end of overpowering the god, but the rebellion comes from there. So the fact it never occurred to them to ask themselves if it's a bias in them establishing their definition of a homosexual that it didn't occur to them is funny. Well, it's pathetic. If gay people have been oppressed, and then you don't show any sensitivity to that when asking them how do they think a gay person should be defined, typically you think of what of an interest or an attraction. What type of person is this person attracted to? Not wanting to stew and boil it down to being the product of a bunch of conflicts, because that's a conflict of interest when your goal is to sell medicine. And I suppose part of the problem would be when it comes to this deciphering of data for them is that they're approaching the phenomenology of conflict establishment from the position of someone for whom information is disclosed in a religiously akin to revelation, a revelatory basis. So God just or Lucifer just brings the words to them in a dream, or they chant a "Please don't make us poofters in the future" chant that I'm sure they practice every second gathering. But if they don't have tests designed to check within the context of someone's formative judgments, and for Roger, if he he's really phonetic in trying to discern, okay, well, this could be a formative judgment, this could be a joke, this could be a some hearsay, this could be, we don't, the amount of damage and mishandling of people that goes on, all because he doesn't have adequate true scientists talk about, particularly if things get quantum, that you need double blind protocols to try to make sure you're not contaminating the veracity of your own scientific studying quest. And what they don't have, where this may throw Gary and Roger off kilter, is that there are two of them, and they're both very invested into blind faith in terms of spirituality. So maybe they think that there's some grounds for equivocation there. It's like, surely it must, it's got to be just about the same thing, like a generic brand, You have a very well-designed scientific study, and it's at double-blind protocols. Well, that's the same thing as two Freemason amateur scientists sharing a bunch of presumptuous 16th century Pufterama beliefs on the basis of blind faith, isn't it? Is it not? So the keyword search isn't appropriate, because just about every single offensive word you can think of has appropriateness in given the context. Whereas if Roger's goal is to find the paranomasia from where you first discovered To Kill a Mockingbird in the school library, and he's having a pedo's inquiry into someone else's primary school memories, and then censoring. And it was my employer of mine going, these schizophrenics, sadly, they don't live long. They live till they're 50. Most of them don't live long, and this idea that there's mistreatment and malpractice going on, and because of the respect and admiration that the National Academy of Sciences has for proper use of scientific method, and granted that they're like over 90% agnostic or atheist, then they're not in. Francis Collins, he has a hippie book about seeing a waterfall, three-way split waterfall that put him in the mind of the Trinity, and then he got down on all fours and pledged his heart to Jesus in the dewy grass, and but he still did contribute profound work on the matter of the human DNA project. Now that's so that's a scientist that does know how to partition. When Roger Toller and Gary are doing their studies, they don't know how to partition. They will go, I'm getting it, like reading on the word kill. Oh, it was to kill the mockingbird. Oh, well, look, we better tie that, irradiate that one anyway. Oh, did you read, smoking kills on cigarette packet warning? Better shock away that one. So he's fucked in the head on so many fronts. He needs to have written requests for consent to begin with. He needs to have lengthy talks to you about what his process involves, what they're looking for, and just to take. So it shows, wanting to pick on Doppelhurst shows it shows that idea that I detest, which is that you go around talking about how insensitively the worst moments for a person's childhood are what you think are going to be the most inspiring and compelling moves for them to reenact in their adulthood. And that means that the only way that you could say that without being biased is that if you are unaware of what being off-put or a deterrent is, which means nothing in your life has ever deterred you, and you would, as an adult, be as childish in your behavior as, I guess, as you were as a child then, because you didn't learn what deterrence was. I don't comprehend it, but it's for sale. That's why I also don't get why people didn't gather that. Like this idea is for sale, and it's for sale because it markets to Christian audiences who if you think that I don't think hardened criminals or criminal offenders commit their crimes because of this or that childhood or underage phenomenon. You'd have them building various shrines to those moments all along the way. You'd have every friend they make along the way getting talked to about this or that person from their childhood. Yeah, you would expect all these various other kinds of behaviors that, and yet all of a sudden there's an offense, and you have to go, oh, this has to have had something to do with this person's childhood. And if it's Inspector Christian that's trying to solve this mystery, well, I know that your ethics come from a story that's all about blood and bloodshed. To say bloodshed saves the soul. So I've watched their bias towards my family to some extent and gone, that's all you have you think you have the decency to fucking think about. His blood's been spilled. And it was when I first started imagining that the day would come when I wouldn't be able to lose a debate or an argument contest against a religious adherent of Christianity or any of the Christian offshoots. And yeah, I'm glad to have shared the dream of unbelief, and art being really the best spirituality that there is left for us now. So yeah, I hope it's easily understood that I distance myself from such admitted faults. But what had me truly astounded was, and I was naive in that regard, knowing how to keep atheological lines of talk away from the duty of working in a chemist, and then presuming that others were to know the same. And yeah, so that to the end of it's a lot of moral compromise to the end that you wish to see a greater increase in supply and demand for the provision of antipsychotic rebatable injections. It's also a chance for, and this is something that Freemasons talk about, their ideal world being comprised of, and it's one where they'll use the term everybody's working, but without giving recourse to of consideration to working in what avenue, what type of work do you mean? And there are types of work that they don't find to be complementary to their business's interest. So, for instance, if you were to say, what about a health system critic who goes about auditing or reviewing notes from previous auditing work done by and combines them to complaints lodged against a particular company, assesses things like how long long-term employees tend to stick around, what reasons are given for leaving when they leave them, what is the exploration essentially of any evidence of corruption in a country, in a company. There's art that they don't like to some extent. Their profiles will be, as in their own minds, these are profiles of people who have gone wrong for various reasons. So it's like you getting a smack on the wrist for thinking or beginning to think in ways that this profile has, by its categorical definition, shunned or repudiated. So a popularity contest of prospective career paths. I have physically disabling pain right now, but it doesn't mean it's not impossible for me to work on with the goals I have had in writing. You can be injured and be a writer. But yeah, so now when I talk about Roger fingering his mum, as a kid, and his as a voice dropping teen. It's to do with behaviors of his, like, dignified talk of what it is to be an Australian, but he can't fight a battle that he's picked with me on Australian turf. He's got to hope I never hear about it while he dumps it overseas somewhere else, in the hopes that I'll never learn of it. And that's cowardly as, but that's like, him coming from Tasmania to the mainland in the hopes that you won't hear about what went on between Roger and Mother Dear before he decided to come to the mainland. Given no training, his interest in both being like the policeman and the psychiatrist, and to make discoveries that sort of show a mix of influences from both fields, but not be qualified in either, is a proof of one more than one truth about religious hysteria, where you have the evangelists thinking that it's appropriate to put women of all sorts in distress when they go through what respectively each woman would go through differently and in her own way if she were to go to an abortion clinic. Wendy writes, a creationist who talked to Richard Dawkins, and she mentioned her getting arrested for praying at the front of an abortion clinic. And where I think it shouldn't be allowed. I think that's a freedom of speech issue, that given what Christians have said about prayer, there's no reason why they couldn't do that sort of praying in such a way that simultaneously safeguarded the secure premises of an abortion clinic or an abortion clinic car park. So they've got nothing to gain from it except to divert the attention of the women that are attending a clinic there. Now, so the phenomenon of the religious conqueror is still absolutely present in Freemasonry, and you have to have some formulaic epistemological difference if you want to get into comparative religions and which ones more true, which one's more likely to have elements of truth in it, if that's where they want to go, or cooler. I don't know how because the main concern that people have with respect to joining religious groups is there a beam of truth to any of this? And so when when Roger Tall's impersonative of psych qualifications, when he's impersonative of military police qualifications, and he can get away with that, it's really because of tech options that he has, and because of the Freemason hidden at a distance, and because he had the opportunity to mislead me to believe otherwise about him as an employee. So that's that. But they're all reasons for the gleams on the badges of faggotry that he wears proudly, proud and tall.